A very good day everyone, my name is Kipian Kalapati and my matrix number is 078262.
I will begin with the introduction of this case. So, in the case of R against Bow Street Metropolitan Stipendary Magistrate ex parte Pinochet Ugarte is a significant legal battle that addresses the complexities of international law, human rights, and the extradition of a former head of state. The case centers around Augusto Pinochet, who ruled Chile from 1973 to 1990 and was accused of numerous human rights violations, including torture and conspiracy to commit torture. In 1998, following his arrival in the United Kingdom for medical treatment, the Spanish government sought his extradition to face charges related to these crimes. There are two critical legal questions in this case, which is whether the acts attributed to Pinochet constituted extradition crimes under UK law and whether he could claim immunity as a former head of state for these actions. Initially, a magistrate issued a warrant for his arrest based on the extradition request. However, Pinochet challenged this warrant in court, leading to a ruling by the Queen's Bench Divisional Court that granted him immunity from extradition for acts committed while he was in the office. This decision was appealed by both the Commissioner of Police and the Spanish government, prompting a review by the House of Lords. The court had to consider complex legal principles, including the definition of torture under UK law and the implications of international treaties such as the Convention Against Torture. The House of Lords ultimately ruled that while Pinochet could claim immunity for some actions taken during his presidency, he could not claim immunity for acts of torture committed after the UK had criminalized such actions in 1988. This case not only set a precedent regarding the accountability of former leaders for human rights abuses, but also highlighted the evolving nature of international law in addressing crimes against humanity. The ruling underscored that no individual, regardless of their position, is above the law when it comes to serious violations such as torture. As for the case summary of R against Bow Street Metropolitan Stipendary Magistrate ex parte Pinochet Ugarte revolves around the extradition of former Chilean dictator, which is Augusto Pinochet, from the United Kingdom to Spain. In 1998, after Pinochet arrived in the UK for medical treatment, the Spanish government sought his extradition on charges of torture and conspiracy to commit torture during his time in power from 1973 to 1990. The legal issues at stake included whether the acts Pinochet was accused of constituted extradition crimes under UK law and whether he was entitled to immunity as a former head of state. Initially, a magistrate issued a warrant for Pinochet's arrest, but he challenged this decision in court. The Queen's Bench Divisional Court ruled in his favor, stating that as a former head of state, he had immunity from extradition for acts committed while in office. This decision was appealed by the Commissioner of Police and the Spanish government to the House of Lords. The House of Lords ultimately held that not all acts attributed to Pinochet were covered by his claim to immunity. The court found that while torture was not recognized as a crime in the UK until September 1988, any acts of torture committed after this date could be prosecuted. Thus, it was determined that extradition could proceed for crimes committed after the UK had criminalized torture under its law. To sum up, the case highlighted complex issues surrounding international law, state immunity, and human rights. The House of Lords ruled that Pinochet could not claim immunity for acts of torture committed after the UK ratified the Convention Against Torture, allowing extradition proceedings to continue for those specific charges.
The critical issue revolved around whether the conduct alleged in the extradition request had to constitute a crime under UK law at the time it was committed, referred to as the conduct date, or if it sufficed that it was a crime under UK law at the time of the extradition request, which is the request date. In Rex against Bow Street Metropolitan Stipendary Magistrate case, House of Lords held that according to the correct interpretation of Section 2 of the 1989 Act, these statements that if it occurred in the United Kingdom would constitute an offence means that the behaviour had to be illegal in the UK at the time it happened, not just on the day the extradition request was made. According to Lord Bingham, Court Justice, it was not necessary that the conduct of the crime must be at the date of the incident, but only at the date of request for extradition. The question is whether these references, if it occurred in the United Kingdom, would constitute an offence related to a hypothetical event that happened on the date of the extradition request, which is the request date or the conduct date. According to Lord Bingham, Court Justice of the Divisional Court, the word simply required that the conduct be illegal on the day of the request. The court determined the critical date by first looking at the double criminality rule. According to the double criminality rule, the behaviour in question must be illegal in both the requested and requesting states. The Extradition Act 1989 defines extradition crimes as actions that, if they had taken place in the United Kingdom, would have been punishable by a minimum of 12 months in jail. Next, the court will look into the statutory interpretation. The court argued over whether the wording, if it occurred in the United Kingdom, applied to the behaviour at the time of the request or when it was committed. According to Lord Bingham and Lord Lloyd, the wording can allude to the request date, avoiding the needless retrospective effect of the statute. The House of Lords came to the conclusion that the behaviour had to be illegal under UK law on the day of the conduct. This approach ensured that people are not persecuted for acts that were not crimes under UK law at the time they were performed, in line with historical precedents and pragmatic concerns. The court's ruling upheld the criminal law principle of non-retroactivity by making it clear that the date of the behaviour itself is the crucial date for establishing whether it qualifies as an extradition crime under UK law.
Today, I'll be explaining the second question of our assignment, which is to what extent a plea of immunity as a head of state may be available. We have answered this question in 5 parts, and I'll be explaining the first 3 parts of our answers. First of all, traditional framework of immunity. Absolute immunity, also known as ration persona, applies to serving heads of state, and it also protects them from legal action for both private and official acts while in office. Functional immunity, also known as racial materia, applies to former heads of state, and it protects acts performed in an official capacity as state actions. All this framework of immunity designed to maintain state sovereignty and diplomatic relations. The second part of our answer for this question is impact of the Pinnacle case. The Pinnacle case highlighted limitations in the immunity principles for grave crimes. UK House of Lords ruled that some acts like torture violate jus cogens norms and cannot be shielded by immunity. Our third part of answer for this particular question is key legal principles established. First, torture and jus cogens norms. Torture is prohibited under jus cogens norms, which are binding on all states. These norms impose obligations owed to the international community, known as erga omnes. Second part of the answer will be universal jurisdiction, established under the UN Convention Against Torture and UK's Criminal Justice Act 1988. Allows states to prosecute individuals for torture regardless of where it was committed or the nationality of the perpetrator. Torture cannot be an official act. The court ruled torture is inherently illegal and not a legitimate state function.
In addition, the case emphasized a growing focus on accountability over the sovereignty. It underscored the principle that individuals who commit grave human rights violations should be held responsible regardless of their official capacity. This ruling paved the way for prosecuting perpetrators of serious international crimes, affirming that no one is above the law. Therefore, the Pinochet case set a powerful precedent in international law by limiting immunity for the heads of state in the cases involving international crime. It reinforced the importance of accountability and justice, which signaling a move away from impunity and towards stronger protections for human rights. In conclusion, the Pinochet case redefined the scope of head of state immunity. While heads of state retain immunity during their tenure, this protection does not cover former leaders who commit international crimes like torture. The ruling affirmed that such acts are not official state function, emphasizing that the need for accountability. The Pinochet case is a landmark in the fight against the impunity and represents a growing focus on protecting human rights in international law.
The third question is, do you agree with the decision of the second ruling of this case? Why or why not? The second ruling in Rats and Bow Street Metropolitan State Penjara Magistrate reflects a critical moment in ensuring the integrity of judicial proceedings. This decision annulled the initial judgment due to Lord Hoffman's undisclosed association with Amnesty International, an intervening party. I agree with this ruling because it upheld the principles of judicial impartiality and procedural fairness, which are fundamental to the rule of law. I strongly support the court's decision because judicial impartiality is vital for maintaining public confidence in legal systems. Lord Hoffman's connection to Amnesty International, which he did not disclose, made it seem like he might not be completely neutral to his decision in court. As Tuminello explains, the perception of fairness in judicial processes is just as important as fairness itself. The annulment of the first decision sends a clearer message that the judiciary must operate free from even the appearance of bias. This ensures that future cases are decided based on legal merit rather than external affiliations or influences. Next, I also agree with the court's decision because it protected procedural fairness, an essential element of justice. Procedural fairness ensures that all parties are treated equitably and that decisions are made by unbiased adjudicators. The court's willingness to revisit its earlier decision demonstrated its commitment to this principle, as bianchi emphasizes adherence to procedural norms threatens the legitimacy of judicial outcomes. By setting aside the initial ruling, the court preserved the integrity of the legal process, affirming that justice must not only be done but also be seen to be done.
Lastly, I believe the second ruling also contributes positively to the development of international human rights law. By addressing procedural irregularities, the ruling allowed the case to proceed with the necessary fairness and integrity, ultimately reinforcing the principles that no individual is above the law. This aligns with the view of Byers, 1999, who highlights that accountability for human rights violations must be pursued without compromising the fairness of the legal system. To conclude, I fully agree with the second ruling in the Pinochet case. The decision to annul the initial judgment was a principled one, prioritizing judicial impartiality and procedural fairness over expediency. This ruling preserved the credibility of the legal process and reinforced the importance of fairness in adjudicating cases with profound international implications. By taking this careful approach, the court demonstrated its commitment to the rule of law and the principles of justice that underpin it.
In conclusion, House of Lords focused on two issues from the case above. First, according to the court, torture could only be considered an extradition offence under the double criminality principle if it occurred after September 29, 1988, the day the Criminal Justice Act of 1988 went into force. According to this concept, the behaviour must have been illegal under UK law at the time it was carried out. Therefore, extradition could not be justified on a number of allegations of torture and conspiracy to torture that were brought before this day. Next, the Lords ruled that torture carried out by a former head of state is not protected by official immunity. They argued that torture is covered by universal jurisdiction and is considered an international crime under 1988 Torture Convention. The court decided that such actions are not eligible for immunity protection since they cannot be regarded as official activities of a head of state. Because Pinochet was charged with torture and conspiracy to torture after 1988, the ruling permitted the continuation of extradition proceedings against him. This established a crucial precedent confirming that claims of official immunity for grave crimes like torture can be superseded by international human rights standards.